Hello and welcome back to another great big on-time episode of Big Bad Books. I'm Isaac, and on the ham horn is Declan, and we're thrilled to be back, aren't we?
Oh, delighted.
Thrilled to the core.
I couldn't think of anything better to be doing in 30 degrees.
You're enjoying the weather.
No?
Are you going to enjoy it more when it gets hotter? Because sometimes, it's like the anticipation of the badness that's the worst part. And the actual day of it being 40 degrees, you'll be fine.
No, that probably won't be the case for me either. There was a fun thing where it was sports day on Friday.
Oh, that is fun. Do you get to participate as a teacher?
I did. There was a teacher's relay.
Yes. How did you do?
Good fun. Well, it was a bit unfortunate because there was a miscommunication between members of my team as to which lane we were in. So my very fast team turned out to be in the lane next to me.
That is a shame.
As I saw them careening around the corner, and then I was like, "Oh." So, my leg, I did very well. That's all. That's as much.
And that's what relay's all about, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
Individual achievement.
Then at the end, there was a big celebration because the kids got told that the school will be closing at like 1:45
on the hot days
on Monday and Tuesday, and they can wear their like PE tops to school.
Not quite as good as just not.
Which was the first that we'd heard of it.
That's good
as well. And then less than an hour later, we all got an email saying actually the school is closed on Monday and Tuesday, but not for staff.
No, why? What have you got to do?
We have to go
teach each other.
We have to go in and set remote learning lessons.
Can't you do that from home by the very nature of a remote learning lesson?
It's funny that you've brought that up.
Do you want me to raise that?
Yes, you could do that. But yeah,
I guess it will be easier for you to do the commute because sometimes it's like you have to be in the place of work for it to feel like work. I don't know if that's something you have.
Well, the sort of the working from home lot, like they're never really like working all that much, are they? So
thank you for saying that. We've got to put out a big warning, haven't we, for all our British viewers? Monday is a no books day because if you, like Ray Bradbury warned us, they'll burst into flame in your hands at 40 degrees.
That's it.
451 in Fahrenheit converts to, it's about 39 Celsius. So you want to be very careful. I wouldn't want any of our readers to get burnt hands or face. Some people hold a book very close to the face.
And the sun, it reflects straight off.
Yeah. So true. Now, Ready Player 2 won't stop anytime soon, it turns out. And you'll remember probably last time...
We're back below the 50% mark again.
Yeah, we're back at 8%. I don't know how it's happening. The start of this chapter is at 54%, which is thrilling. I do feel good about that. But what's less thrilling is I sort of skimmed through the previous chapter, 0014, just to remind myself of what happened. And the reason I couldn't remember is because nothing at all did happen.
Yeah, no. They were just walking through the John Hughes
kaleidoscope of John Hughes stuff, yeah.
And there was that confusing thing about how they're all happening at the same time, but
in the same
not
place,
in sync.
but not, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very, very, very
really cool. Now, you'll remember probably my key part of the chapter, this is a key chapter warning, the needle drop, which was the moment where...
of course.
If you can imagine this, I don't know if you've played a video game or something, as you walk through a door, say, then it might start playing a song like, Welcome home to... Big Shermo, welcome home to my John Hughes boys, or something like that. Not necessarily that, I'm saying. It could be anything.
It could be, though.
Quick warning, there's only one needle drop in chapter 005. So if you were a fan of those, I'd say go back and listen to the previous episode.
He probably run out of songs, because there were so many last time.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, though, the one he's got in 0015, it's a good one. It is a fucking good one.
Is it? It Don't You Forget About Me? I'll be
it
really...
is. Oh
wow!
Did you read this chapter already?
Among Us could have foreseen.
Now, in between reading chapters 14 and 15, I saw The Breakfast Club for the first time.
Yeah,
it's all right. I didn't hate it.
Yeah, it's quite a good movie.
I think this book has made me sort of think that I hate John Hughes more than I do, and actually, I don't think I hate him at all.
They're sort of fine.
Yeah, I like The Breakfast Club because nothing really happens in it. And
yeah, exactly.
I sort of wonder.
Apart from they try and like yassify the goth girl, and it's just much worse.
Oh yeah, that is a choice. And also Emilio Estevez is an old guy, isn't he? In that film, that's noteworthy. He's noteworthily 55.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was enjoyable, and I saw it outside, which really added to the whole experience.
Wow.
I felt like I was in The Breakfast Club.
Well, why? Because they're inside.
That's why I was like, I'm in
You're
it when
outside.
I'm watching the fiction. So, and then I realized, oh wait, I'm outside. So how could I? And it's actually tea time. So
how can I possibly? Wow.
But that's the power of fiction, isn't it?
The differences were myriad, but
and yet
still outweighed by the
Hughes
similarities.
Was able he was to reach beyond the grave. I don't know if he's dead.
He is very dead.
Is he? Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. Let's get straight into it. And we've got, just to warn you, not a lot, but halfway through we'll be stopping for some interstitial content where it feels like the B plot of Ready Player 2 is Caledonia Gulag, whatever the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
To me, these books are like becoming part of the same thing, where it's like I'll be reading about John Hughes and I'm like, and then the woke mob stopped my dad from remembering God. It's a shame as well.
Let me tell you, they have been. They have been.
But yeah, it's something to look forward to, and perhaps maybe we switch at some point if you want. We could maybe Caledonia becomes the main thing, and I'll just start doing interstitial Ready Player 2.
I don't think that would be good because I'd have to buy it.
Oh, that would be a shame.
Yeah.
As Art 3 Miss led us through the hallowed halls of Shermer High School, we began to see a lot of strange things, which is of strange things has big, that fake Stuart Lee, Dan Brown thing where he's like, the famous man looked at the ancient cup or whatever it is, which I think about every so often.
It's such like placeholder. I'll come back to say what the strange things
I'm surprised you don't see the square brackets around it or the little like annotation. Fix later. Just inside the entrance, we passed a gaggle of jocks, which is a great,
not the collective
noun. Wearing identical.
When it's people, can you just choose any?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. If they were particularly duck-like.
I saw a pride of jocks.
That would be better. Wearing identical blue and grey Letterman jackets featuring the school mascot, a bulldog. I recognised Andrew Clark (brackets Emilio Estevez's character in The Breakfast Club) among them, along with Jake Ryan (brackets Michael Shuffling's character from 16 Candles) close brackets. They were both admiring a pep rally banner that read "Go Bulldogs, go!" Every time he mentions a character in this chapter, he puts in brackets the actor and the film that they're from.
Oh, why does he do that?
I guess it's, I throw it back to you. Why does he do that? Is it good? Like, because I've read it already. I was
and I thought that maybe having done so, you'd have some answers.
No, I suppose it just became part of the landscape of what I came to enjoy about the chapter.
It sort of feels like if you have to do that it's not very good, is it? What you're doing?
Well, it could be said like maybe it's educational.
Because either, like, I would say that either you know who that is or you don't, and if you do know, then it doesn't matter. And if you don't know, saying the actor isn't going to help. I
suppose, but it is fun to. Because, say he said Andrew Clark and you'd be like, oh, that's just probably some guy. But no, it's actually Emilio Estevez's character in The Breakfast Club.
If I were to, I know we don't like to do sort of parallels because, each artist is their own.
Yeah, so true.
But in Ratner's Star, which is a book by Don DeLillo.
It's quite similar. Text.
Very similar.
It's also set in the high school from 16 Candles, which I thought was strange.
There's also needle drops, weirdly. But... no, so like what happens is there's loads of scientists and mathematicians.
Real ones?
No.
Okay.
No, like just sort of fictional ones within the world. But they're talking about lots of real mathematical and scientific like theories and words and language and jargon. But it's kind of, the whole point is sort of that it's supposed to be quite disorientating and also that he sort of like manages to use it all quite lyrically to make it sort of an aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
And so quite similar. What he doesn't do is he doesn't say like, the name of this theory or this force and then in brackets put the whole thing and then a link to the Wikipedia.
And you wish he did.
He just sort of like lets you enjoy the book.
Yeah.
All I'm saying
is
an innovator. Different.
I guess he hadn't read Ready Player 2 yet, but now that he has.
Yeah, maybe he just, because the internet wasn't about when he wrote it, he didn't know what they were either. So he was just like...
He was just name dropping. And that's, I guess, what Ernest is keen not to do. Like, he doesn't want us to think that he doesn't know who these characters are. Because he obviously, he knows them very well. Very well.
Oh, God. Like, I would never,
You wouldn't fault his Hughes knowledge.
He didn't have to look them up. It's just like it looks as though he did.
Yeah, and it's just a helpful kind of guide stone. He's sort of doing that thing where you can get like an annotated version of Ulysses. Like he's doing that but in the book, because he was like, why do footnotes at the end when you can do them in text?
He tried to read Infinite Jest. He said, enough of this.
I can't be looking up and down. Come on, left to right enough. One axis only, please. So yeah, they're in Shermer High School. It's prom night every night, which sounds really awful. And they're looking for someone, I think Molly Ringwald, but I think I might think that because it turns out she's in like every John Hughes film, which I didn't really know. I don't think I'd ever seen what she looked like before in my life, before I saw the film the other day. So there she is, Molly Ringwald's walking around, but oh no, it's the wrong Ringwald, which is quite hard to say. Artemis said, shaking her head. Ringwald. That's Claire Standish, the Molly from the Breakfast Club. We're looking for the Molly from Pretty in Pink. And at this time of the morning, she should be right, ... over ... there.
How do you know? Because isn't it a different time in all of the movies?
Yeah, but don't worry. Well, actually, there's a good question, because later on she does explain that the NPCs have a kind of random aspect to their motion. So she just knew that one though.
Oh, okay. Well, that
it's random except for
that one when you need it to be. Yeah. Okay, well that's good.
So Molly Ringwald's there again. As she's going to be a lot in this chapter, like a fucking ghost of Christmas now. This incarnation wore a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles, her bright red hair peeking out from beneath a black hat with a flower print scarf wrapped around it. She was dressed in... So she's from the film Pretty in Pink.
Yes.
That's key information. She was dressed in a pink sweater over a pink blouse, and she did, in fact, look quite pretty in both of them. Wade notes about a kid.
He doesn't actually say that, though.
I'm afraid, does.
No. That was a bit that you added in jest.
No, not so much with the jest. I tried to avoid making any jokes about Ready Player 2 because it would denigrate the art.
So what he says is he says that she's from Pretty in Pink,
and she's
then
in
he
pink
describes
and
the
is
pink she's in.
It's got a real sort of like call and response structure, like it's wrapped up in a bow.
What do you think was do you think it was a sort of a Catholic notion he was going for there, or?
I think it's a lot like when John Donne talks about the 3 in 1 and 1 in 3.
Right.
And that could have been an age thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose instead of like 1, you could have had Pretty, and instead of 3, you could have had Pink.
Yeah,
and then
it's a reference.
It's Pretty in Pink, but also Pink in Pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate this place, H said, shaking her head as she took in our surroundings. It's like being stuck in the Matrix with the Brat Pack. And then I only highlighted this part because
that's terrible.
It's one of our phrases that we love to say.
I hate that. That's terrible.
That's why I love it, Art 3 Miss replied. Don't yuck my yum, H. Don't do it now.
What? No.
I love that saying so much. That's one of the kind of shibboleths for a Wendigo type person. Like if he's not actually called Wendigo, is he? He's called Chuck Wendig, but in my head he's just called Wendigo. But whenever
he
someone
is like a
says
sort of horrid creature, yeah.
Anyone who says things like "Don't yuck my yum" is Chuck Wendig. Like they're cut from the same cloth, the Wendig cloth.
Oh yeah, 100%. Speaking of, it's the old Internet Archive trial going on at the moment, isn't it?
Oh yes, I thought I saw. I remembered I'm blocked by Chuck Wendig.
That's mostly his fault.
Oh, it is entirely his fault.
Yeah.
Why am I blocked by Chuck Wendig? Do you know?
Well, no. We both were.
That's wild. I'm not blocked by anyone usually because I don't really do any controversial tweets.
Well, the only explanation is that he's heard.
Someone sent him a witch chat. They don't like me talking about fucking witches every page. Okay, well, this'll show them. Don't yuck my yum. Blocked. Wow.
I'm having a scuba dabba dee doo morning. I'm gonna flim flirm these fuckers off of my Twitter feed.
God, it gives me such chills.
What a fucking creep.
Yeah, he's a big cringo. No. Oh, so wait, they're like, hold on. Andy Walsh didn't attend this school in Pretty in Pink, did she? I think the only function of this I can think of, because it's certainly not interesting to read, is that it must be very important for him to remind us that this is an amalgamated space.
Can I ask if there's any reason why this couldn't have been in the last chapter?
Well, it was. That's the thing. And one thing that's peculiar about our reader experience is that there are sometimes as many as months between reading a chapter, and even to us it feels repetitious. If you read this book in one go, it would have the effect of like it's like gaslighting you into thinking you've got Alzheimer's.
Running as fast as you can to stay exactly where you are.
Yeah, it's like every page reminds you of 5 things that were on the previous page.
Yeah.
Which is just borderline acceptable when we're trying to recap for the purposes of a podcast what happened in the previous chapter.
It's Breaking Bad storytelling, right? Which is something big can only happen at the very end of a chapter.
Yeah.
You can't have anything happening in between.
And sometimes not even then.
So if you want something big to happen, then you've got to end the chapter and start a new one, even if there's literally no difference in the time, space,
and even
tone.
if in the next chapter all that there is to talk about is the thing that just happened.
Yeah, and
wasn't it interesting?
You're literally just moving on now.
Anyway, no, she attended another fictional school, Meadowbrook High.
God.
But then she reminds us the characters and filming locations were amalgamated into Shermer. It's got the kind of vibe of like something someone would say to you at like the DVLA. It's got like such boring administrative, bureaucratic, like, oh, they were amalgamated into Shermer along with the rest of Hughes' filmography.
To me, it's got the vibe of something that, as he's writing it, he realizes just how unworkable this is. That it just like doesn't work, but is sort of like sunk cost too far.
Yeah, he's got to make it.
I was just like, oh well, they might not be there, but I suppose they could be here. It's all very complicated. Don't worry about it.
There is an awkward sort of corner that he paints himself into as an entity, where like because of the nature of the stuff he's writing about, all of his diehard fans, as we've said before, are going to be sort of versions of him that equally obsess about the minutiae of pop culture, to the point that, if the wrong Molly Ringwald appeared, even if it only indicated by like, well, she was wearing wire spectacles in Pretty in Pink, but there were a thicker lens in, like, even if it was something as stupid as that, like, people would kick off and he'd get emails and his sort of nerd cred would diminish. So he has this problem that you see in like how kind of like how internet communities and political parties form, where it's like, right, you know what, there are too many rules in that one, so we're going to have one with no rules, and it's going to be for the cool guys only. And then they're quickly, after about 2 minutes of exposure to reality, they're like, okay, well, we've got this one rule.
We have to have some,
and then these 5 kind of sub rules.
Can't be lawless.
So he ends up having to kind of rules lawyer his way through every chapter, being like, so I know, of course, that any true fan like I would be aware that this Molly Ringwald could not exist with.
In spite of the title, she was really more sort of mid in magenta.
Mid in magenta's very good. It sounds like a murder mystery as well. I like that. But yeah, it makes for very, just to underline this point, dull and boring prose to have to be at every point. It's like defensive driving as a writing style. It's like he's got to frame every sentence so that it's impervious to nerd attack. And it's just, you could just not do that. And I think it would probably be better.
Just like one by one, having all your pieces on the board taken until like you've done nothing and you've still lost.
Yeah, exactly. All of the concessions he has to make to actually telling a story to be like, but the amalgamation of the 2 high schools meant that at precisely 12 o'clock, you could see one of 7 different characters played by the same actor who was born in... It's just dumb.
At least although you're right, like that is a corner that he's painted himself into. He is the one person who can afford to paint himself into such a corner because his fandom will accept any kind of Deus Ex that he needs to use in order to get himself out of it.
And you probably, if you're writing in this manner, you probably can't do anything but rely on that kind of like plot twist to make things happen. It's kind of like why the puzzles are so unsatisfying, because they have no answer, or the answer all at once.
Yeah.
Because he's got no time to sort of set up any solving or show anyone engaging with them, because he's too busy like covering his arse in case someone points out some like continuity error.
And I can't remember why I was thinking about this, but I was thinking again the other day is that I think part of the reason for this is that there is, as far as I'm aware, like actually never any puzzling element. None. It is just about if you know the particular pieces of media. But like, because the fans are the same kind of like absolute super freaks as he is, if you drop any of the hints as to what they might be, they can just probably look it up, like what the answer is. So it inevitably has to come out of nowhere, because if he's like, oh, you know, it was, you know, something about like there was a clue on the map that was like a clock, and they're like, oh, a clock. Oh, well, there was a drawing of a clock on the like $100 bill that Nicolas Cage used in in National Treasure. Nicolas
Treasure is a lovely idea.
National Treasure. And so like, oh well, let's find out what the time was there. Oh well, let's go to that time in the movie. Oh well, the answer's this.
Yeah.
And they are the sort of freaks who would do that just to say like they got there before him, even though no one to prove it.
Which leads to the puzzles are quite a good microcosm for that problem. I agree, because like they are deeply unsatisfying. You're not presented unless, like you say, unless you are super fan to the point that you're basically just the same person as Ernest Cline and Chuck Wendig and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Unless you are this guy, then there's nothing to go on. Like the point of a good mystery in fiction is that you're presented with a fair chance of solving it. But as we will see, because this one's about to be semi-solved in this chapter, the solution is just so outlandish that it really just becomes, did you guess what I was thinking? And he's clearly aware of that, because about 5 times in the chapter, I didn't highlight them all, someone will be like, because Artemis is driving the narrative, she knows what to do, and someone's like, Artemis, what are we doing? And she's like, there's no time to explain. It's like, well, there's 20 pages to talk about which Ferris Bueller there was.
Yeah.
So I think
every single level of Sega Ninja Sega.
Yeah. I think we probably could have 1 paragraph explanation, but the puzzle doesn't work because it isn't a puzzle. It's just, I'm thinking of this thing and I'm going to obscure it sufficiently that only at the right moment shall I solve it via Artemis.
That's good.
And it makes for a very unsatisfying plot.
That's probably just a new form of puzzle. That
maybe.
With.
Yeah, maybe. In which case, who am I to stand in the way of progress?
Why exactly?
Puzzling or otherwise. So on the next page, this very rarely happens. There are 2 pages in a row with no highlights because it's just a scene from Ferris Bueller happening, except like there's someone running around being like, save Ferris, because he pretends that he needs a new kidney, and that just happens. And I guess the point is just remember what that was like when you watched Ferris Bueller. And I did remember it, and it wasn't a particularly interesting part of the film.
It's just as well, like, if you're going to do something like this, I think that they're probably, if you're going to insist on, having this planet of, what is it, Sherma?
Sherma Bill.
Right? If you're going to insist on that, like, there probably is a bunch of cool stuff that you could do that I would probably start doing sooner. Like making the Ferris Bueller's fuck each other or something. I don't know.
Or just just listing all the characters that were there and like which part of the school they were in.
Oh no, I was thinking about not doing that. I was thinking about trying to do something slightly different.
I suppose the problem is then just like different people have different ideas of fun, because as we know, for Cline, nothing is more fun than a list.
Actually, you can edit that out. That was a foolish.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No, I mean it's fine. I mean you'd have done it differently, but then we all would.
I haven't made millions of dollars.
No, exactly.
So
maybe if you just started writing lists of things that happened once, you get it. I guess that's what historians do.
Get a notes app going.
Blah blah blah. They're trying to follow Andy. I can't remember. Is it Andy McDowell? Maybe. No one cares. It turns out not to be very relevant. The school bell rings, and they're walking through the corridors. That classic moment he's trying to capture. There'd probably be like dum bum bum. Brum, brum, like under it as everyone's walking to their classes, and Wade sort of gets shoulder barged by someone, and it's a young Juliette Lewis with her hair done up in a frizzy blonde 80s perm. I love frizzy blonde 80s perm. I knew her best from her starring roles in Strange Days and From Dusk Till Dawn, so it took me a moment to remember that she'd portrayed Audrey Griswold in Christmas Vacation. Art Through Miss was right. For someone who had trained themselves to identify pop culture icons from the 70s and 80s, this world was one huge distraction, which is pretty cool.
Also, if you're a perv.
If you're a perv that likes hanging out in fictional high schools. So they're just following Artemis around forever. They walk past another scene from Ferris Bueller where he's just like saying all their names. He's like Adams, and then someone's like here. It's for some reason a joke that doesn't work as well on the page.
You had to be there.
Yeah, you really did. Then he walks past the school computer room. Now Wade is a bit of a computer boy. He's a digital Doris, we like to call him, and he peers in. He can't help himself. He's probably erect as well as he does. Who does he see there? This will surprise you. He spots the greatest fictional hacker of the 80s, Bryce Lynch. But you're probably thinking, hang about, what's Bryce Lynch doing in the John Hughes-verse? Because I take it from context alone that he's not a character from from that.
God, just say his name again.
Bryce Lynch. I believe he's from Max Headroom, which you may remember is the name of the robot.
Well, it's an American television series.
He's in a series, is he?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. But anyway, don't worry. Don't fucking panic.
You're only joking, aren't you? Because I typed his name in, and what's this? Bryce Lynch is a false identity used by none other than Wade.
Yes. You're right. That's what I was about to get to. So he has this moment. He's like, hang on, is there something out of place? Then he's like, oh no, it's not out of place. It's Buck Ripley, a character in The Great Outdoors, portrayed by Chris Young, who's the same actor who played Bryce Lynch. And anyway, he says, laboriously getting to the point, even so, I silently saluted him, recalling the dark time during Halliday's contest where I'd used the name Bryce Lynch as my fake identity to avoid detection by IOI and the Sixers, led by Nolan Sorrento.
Is there any kind of fun sort of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead sort of thing where like Ferris Bueller is like he's not in this scene, and so he's just like having a fag out the back of the school, just sort of like waiting for his next line?
Sorry, I should have stopped you at the word fun because there's there's none of that.
So is there a sort of boring version of that going on? Or okay.
Well, he spots Keith Nelson (brackets Eric Stoltz's character from Some Kind of Wonderful). So I don't know. Call that what you like. Then they notice, oh, hang on, the banner says "Go Mules Go." I thought it was Bulldogs a minute ago, and so we get another explanation of how. No. This one part of the school is the Bulldogs. It's the Shermer Bulldogs. And then this team, the football wrestling team, is the Mules. So Shermer it's like, Mules. It's kind of, literally, what a mad name. But it's almost as if the schools have been amalgamated into one school. I don't know if that reads to you.
It feels like that. It feels like it probably doesn't work.
Well, I let me ask you this. Why would he go on about it so much if it didn't work?
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where it's like if he's sort of like trying too hard.
It's such a complicated idea, though, that I do appreciate him re-explaining it every time, because I keep losing track. When he says like there's a character, I'm like, oh, we must be in this film and this film alone. I think to myself, it's like, wow, they're in The Breakfast Club, but hang on, a minute ago they were in this one. But then I remember, because it's re-explained every 3 pages,
right?
Average,
that
it's one. It's Shermer the planet, which is really clever and good.
Yeah.
They see Brian Johnson (brackets Anthony Michael Hall's character in The Breakfast Club) making elephant tusk or some shit. He's making a lamp that doesn't work, and then finally they see Andy Walsh. I don't know who that is, standing next to a young John Cryer, extremely young. There he is, she said. Philip F. Dale.
Well, hang on, how young?
Extremely. He's been baby pilled. There he is, she said. Philip F. Dale, better known as Ducky, aka the Duck Man. Can't even. I mean, that just is from that is probably what is in the film, right? But it's just silly. One of the most divisive and controversial characters ever to spring forth from John Hughes's imagination. Oh, he's
a neo-Nazi.
Yeah, well, it's not. I mean, I guess you have to have seen it to know in what way he's problematic, but there is some explanation. Basically, what she's worked out and is only sort of now half revealing is that some of the quests on this planet don't have any developer credits as like who wrote the quest, and she's starting to think that Kira Morrow must have written some of these Pretty in Pink quests. I never took that seriously, the rumor, but now I'm thinking the rumors may have been true. So Wade is sitting there.
This is
go on. Were you wondering what character they're talking about or what film they're in?
What do you mean?
Just when you go to any planet, you can do a couple of quests. It's like our lives. You get a quest like go shop.
Oh yeah,
go work, read book.
And someone's writing all of those.
It's crazy, but true. Yeah,
it's like stranger than fiction. Every time I pop down to Co-op for a Solero, I'm earning Digicoin.
But Wade is sitting there, and he's probably feeling a sense that there's not really a word for it, so allow me to invent one. Puzzle cucked. He's feeling puzzle cucked at this point because he's scratching his little head, and he's like, "What's going on?" It was something about recast.
Because hang on a minute, is this not the second time he's been out puzzled by a female in these books.
A femoid. Can you believe it? He's getting absolutely done.
I tell you what, those femoids are getting too big for their boobs.
Well, that's very much the.
He didn't even pay this one $1 billion.
Not yet. He'll pay her $1 billion to pretend he came up with the plan. So Wade's hanging out. I picture him sort of holding back a little bit from the group, just be like, come on, Wade, come on, pal. I recited the clue printed on the second shard again in my head, trying to figure out why Art3Miss had brought us here. Then I groaned and rolled my eyes. You gotta be kidding me, I said. The first line of the clue is a goddamn pun. Recast the fowl, meaning a fowl, like a waterfowl. Correct, Art3Miss said, smiling at me. More specifically, a duck. She nodded toward Ducky, then drew her curved elven sword from the scabbard on her back, which is a real left turn.
Is she just going to kill him?
She fucking chops his head off.
What?
She does. Yeah. It's turned into like full sort of fanfic.
Amazing if he's instantly removed from every copy of the movie in existence.
Gone. But what do you feel about the reveal? That's what I want to ask. Because this is we've had that dangling in front of us, recast the foul. I guess one.
Well, what? Okay,
let me just check.
Can you just check how is it spelt?
It is FOUL.
Oh, I see. Because you see, like I was thinking that in say a cryptic crossword, one thing that they love to do is use the word flower when actually they mean flower. Yeah. But that the puzzle element is that they're spelt the same.
Yeah.
Whereas here, what's happened is there was just a lie. But
it was a goddamn pun.
There was an error, is what there was.
There was a typo in the middle. Yeah, because it's not like they heard it. Like, no. This could all have been fixed if the second shard did like the mermaid's egg in Harry Potter and was like, we cast the foul. And also they were under the sea.
Yeah.
But no, it was a piece of writing that said FOUL.
Yeah, well,
it doesn't mean waterfowl, does it? It means foul, like, for example, football.
Yeah. It'd be very funny if she's wrong. She just killed this digi guy for no reason.
That would be good. Anyway, she chops his fucking head off.
Yeah.
But, oh no, I got a little bit ahead of myself. We need to feel why she's going to chop his head off. And you'll know from reading nerd porn or turds that...
Do we need to know that?
Wade's a feminist. And I mean, Ernest's a feminist as well. I did get them mixed up. But I guess it's true in both cases. And yeah, this is just a little... I don't want it to get too political, but Ducky's problematic, basically.
Whoa.
Poor Ducky, Shoto whispered, because basically... whoever Ducky is, Andy's not interested. She's like fobbing him off. And Shoto's like, poor Ducky. And Art3Miss is like, poor Ducky? Don't you mean poor Andy? She takes pity on the guy because she knows he's struggling with his own sexual identity and that he doesn't have any other friends. And how does Ducky repay her sympathy and kindness? By ignoring her boundaries, hounding her 24/7 and humiliating her in public every chance he gets. And check out how he treats other women when Andy isn't around. And she sort of turns like she's prepared this moment. And Ducky is harassing two preppy-looking girls. Ladies, we heard him say, listen, I may be able to work out a deal where either one or the both of you could be pregnant by the holidays. What do you... And then she chops his head off before he can finish the sentence. So at this point, I started involuntarily clicking.
Well, obviously. And I'm assuming that everyone applauds.
Well, if he doesn't describe it, it's only because there was too much plot to get through. But we can assume.
Too much applause to describe.
To capture in text. Yeah, that's so true. Now, like I say, I alluded to Nerd Porn Auteur. I hope everyone who is listening to the podcast is familiar. If not, go and look it up. Or you can listen. Is it on our Patreon, our episode where we did?
I think it is, yeah.
You read it out. How would you characterize kind of Klein's feminism? It's sorry, just to answer my own question. Like, it's top tier. It's S tier. He set the bar.
Yeah, well,
for how men should think about and treat
what
women.
I'll do is I don't want to be the one to provide a sort of judgment, so we'll take your judgment, your opinion there, and I'll just describe the sort of things that he says.
Yeah,
which are that if you are a woman who enjoys or partakes in sex, that you are a slut and you're sort of scum. Basically,
it was basically unless you're Velma from Scooby-Doo, you're a whore.
Yeah,
it's the Velma /whore.
But if you are Velma, then you need to be a whore because he wants you to be his whore.
Yeah. It's complex.
Not for money, I should say.
Oh no, that would ruin it.
No, because that there, there's a whole other circle of hell for them, according to Klein.
Yeah, you should want to fuck nerds, is what.
Yeah, and he wants you to like he gets an erection by when you say like something like
Star Trek.
War. Yeah, or if you're like, oh, let's do maths homework.
Yeah,
which again, like
hotly.
I'm not making any accusations, but that is sort of really the sort of thing that, for instance, a child says when they come home from school where they've been given the homework. It's a strange sort of poem that takes a classic position amongst nice guy incels.
Yeah, it's an incel anthem.
Which is that, like, I'm a good guy, I'm a good feminist because I hate women.
Yeah, but in an interesting way.
But I'll put all that behind me to have sex with you if you want.
Yeah, and also you must. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I guess like this moment rings so. It's pure Klein, right? Because we know that he's got these feminist credentials. Like that poem goes back years. That's like decades old now. And if you cut Klein down the middle, it would spell ally in visceral, wouldn't it? And yeah, it's just great to see like Artemis, I suppose, kind of smashing through the glass ceiling of Ducky's throat and neck and spine. And it was a real moment for me. It reminded me a lot of like when Lin-Manuel Miranda rewrote the lyrics to one of his own songs for the Hillary Clinton campaign. It was like it's a girl boss moment. It's a girl boss moment.
That is it, isn't it?
And those can only be written by men. Now, the Duckman is decapitated, and I thought, okay, maybe it's like it is a video game, so maybe it's just he just vanishes, or it's some no.
Is this a video game?
The whole Oasis is a video game.
Isn't this basically a website?
It's a sort of but what's the difference? A website
isn't this
you can
like
play.
Okay, but is this not like going to wikipedia.com and then just stamping on that globe of puzzle pieces?
Well, no, there's quests, and there aren't very many of those on Wikipedia, certainly not ones that you have to make them yourself, is what I'm saying.
Right.
But I thought, it's a digital space is I guess what I mean. And so it would be fine if when you decapitate a fake person in a digital space, they aren't just fully bodily decapitated, bleeding out on the floor. But no, the Duckman is that, and everyone screams as you would if you just watched one of your colleagues have his head lopped off by a person who has no sort of appearance in the 80s.
These NPCs, they're not professional actors. Like, because a professional actor, you stay in character, right?
Yeah. You keep on performing. Like, you'd find where his head had rolled to and keep delivering your lines to.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, Artie, H shouted. You could have warned us first, which is true. She could have warned or indeed told you what any of the plan was at any point. I would be just, there's a real trigger warning about decapitating someone in front of you.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like she should have just been like, okay, I'm not going to tell you what the puzzle is, just for reasons of my own personal sick pleasure, but I will just warn you, when you see me reach for the fucking elven sword that I don't think I mentioned I had until now, just maybe cover your eyes if you're squeamish.
As well, it's like, if you're working as a team, you're sort of all partly kind of responsible for each other's actions. And if you're going to take, normally that's okay if it's just like, oh, let's go over here. And you're like, okay, well, we can all go over there. But if someone's going to go, oh, so just quick sec, don't worry, and then kill someone.
Decapitate the Duckman.
Feels like you've been made party to a crime that you probably... I personally would have had something to say about it.
They're just digital ghosts, though, aren't they? They're not even real.
Well, he's lying bleeding. I don't remember ghosts bleeding.
Who gives a fuck? It's interesting that for a book about like future tech, robot stuff, and for a book that explicitly now has a seemingly sentient AI, there is no interest in, are these people sort of AI stuck in a loop, like a hellish kind of repetitious, I have to go to my locker and then go to class and then go to my locker and go to class, being in Sherma forever. Like, maybe the Duckman is a person. Like, maybe his personhood has just been ended by being decapitated by Artie. But Ernest's not interested in anything like that.
That sounds like a moral question and not a
it's less to do with
boring jargon question.
Yeah, I suppose so.
There's no answer to that in the John Hughes-verse.
Yeah,
I can't. I mean, I haven't studied his movies extensively, but I don't remember many kind of like decapitations via elven swords.
No.
And so if the answer isn't in the source material, Who not one we should bother with to say what the rules are here on Shermer.
So H is like, you could have warned us, and Shoto is like, yeah. Shoto added, chuckling to himself, next time give us a heads up. And the heads is in italics because he's not just saying warn us, he's actually referring to the head.
To the head that is on.
Now there was only one head that got chopped off because ducks don't have multiple heads, and
maybe it's a possessive, like his heads. Or like its head is,
but the head actually went down if you cut it off.
It probably goes like gravity. Shing, because like if you think
if she came from underneath, possibly.
Well, also because for the sword to fit in between the neck.
And it will have to have been lifted. You're
has to have raised.
You're quite right. That's egg on my face.
Yeah. Well, there you
That's probably what we've done there is act out an exact email exchange that Ernest Cline has had with 12 to 1,500 of his fans over the last couple of years. Now, eventually, after the time it's taken to get to this part, Ducky's head and body fade away. I like head and body as separate. I know they are literally severed, but it's just funny. It's got big like bird and animal vibes.
It's to solve the same issue of if he said his body disappeared.
Yeah, something like, but where's his head?
What about the head? Is that that's going to come back in Ready Player 3?
Ducky's head,
the duck head.
And one very funny thing, there are moments in this book where like I just get the impression that Ernest doesn't actually care or like about games. Because like this is just such an incongruous, weird. It's like something that someone had heard of. You know how like all old people call every game Mario for a while.
Yeah.
Like, are you playing that Mario again? And you're playing like Portal. Like, well, no, I'm playing chess. But this same vibe here, because in this real simulation of a high school, where you can now decapitate someone and it has like a real bodily effect.
Yeah.
His body fades away, leaving behind the loot he'd been carrying, which is just so strange. Like it doesn't fit the idiom. And he's carrying a few gold coins, which again, like, why? He's carrying his gold coins, his thrift store clothing, and wingtip shoes with buckles instead of I don't think I needed to know that. It's going to be important later. But it's very weird.
That's so mad.
Yeah, it's weirdly like someone that doesn't know anything about video games writing about a video game. Artemis scoops up the shoes and the tie, but doesn't bother with the clothes or the coins. So I don't know why we bothered even mentioning they were there. Annoying dipshit, she said as she wiped Ducky's blood off her blade and slid it back into its scabbard. I never liked him, or the generations of spineless toolbags who rooted for Andy to end up with him. They now go into this, I'm sure, thrilling discussion, if you're a fan of this movie, about which team. It's a big like Team Edward, team, what's his name, Jason or something.
Mm-hmm.
Discussion of like, Jacob, thank you. Of like, who are you rooting for? And anyway, it turns out that Artemis has found a third way to root for no one. She's
wow.
I thought none of them were a good match for Andy.
Artemis follows the third way.
Yeah. And Kira Morrow held the same opinion. Okay, Shoto said slowly, but I still don't understand why you decapitated Ducky. To recast the foul, she said, now spelling it again, Foul, just to add to the confusion.
Oh, good.
And restore his ending, which, just to be clear, does not answer that question, because none of those verbs had anything to do with detaching one's head from one's body.
Very few. Not even if you take the most generously interpretive, like liberal reading.
How are we supposed to restore the ending where Andy winds up with Ducky when you just killed Ducky? I asked. I'll show you, she said, but we need to make one more stop first. And then she just runs off.
I'd have done the stop first.
Yeah, could have done.
I'd have been prepared once, because post decapitation, anything could happen.
Yeah.
So I'd probably
what's next?
Yeah, I'd probably sort of get the rest of it figured out first, and then go for the neck,
just to check she's not doing like a school shooting.
Yeah,
like we need to talk about Kevin thing.
Or what if he was a sort of not less a duck and more a hydra.
And there are going to be 5 more duck heads.
Exactly.
Fuck, that'd be awful. That'd be awfully interesting and therefore won't happen. I just like the image as well of her like sprinting to all of these impossible to understand or piece together stops. It's got big like Fort Boyard Crystal Maze energy where she's like sprinting but just down one corridor to like a stop very nearby to do another decapitation. It's very good. I think at this point it would be a great moment for us to zoom out from Shermer and zoom in to Gulag Caledonia, where I understand it's all kicking off.
It is. We are entering the hallowed halls of Chapter 1.
Oh, finally.
Yeah, right? We're finally there. Now, interesting stuff about Chapter 1. It's strongly reminiscent of both of the prefaces.
Okay, well, I guess you wouldn't want a big tonal shift,
because you know how in the sort of the preface was it was sort of like, oh, this is what will happen in the year 2050.
Yeah.
And then the sort of second preface, that was also him just sort of saying like, well, this is what's going to happen and why.
just to reinforce it.
Chapter 1 is also we're now in the fiction, but because the characters very similar to Ready Player One, the protagonist is next to indistinguishable from the author.
That's a good thing.
We're just sort of doing all of that again, where it's like, oh, by the way, that thing I said would happen, it's happened.
So we are in the future though now.
We are there. Chapter 1, Glasgow, Scotland, 2050.
Great chapter title.
Tell me if you see any kind of like imagery, thematic stuff that comes out to you in the first
I'll have a think.
Or a couple of sentences here. So, looking out of his window, far out to the spire of an old church reaching towards the heavens and the divine,
That's churches.
David Campbell took a long drag on his insipid nicotine vaporizer.
Insipid is an interesting word.
And then, now here's another theme that's going to be coming back. He peered into the grey, damp, and murky early morning. Yeah. Everything in this chapter has to have a couple of adjectives.
You've got to have 3, don't you? That's what the rule of 3 is.
Yeah, and almost every time, at least one of them is grey.
Wow. Really painting a grey picture.
Yeah, so he had... he unfortunately, he hadn't had a lot of sleep. Dr.
Can I just interrupt?
Yeah, please.
Is he in Gulag Caledonia now?
Right as we speak.
But forgive me, I was under the impression that the citizens of Gulag Caledonia had forgotten God, and yet they're just one window away. Lies a church that was divinely stretching up to the heavens.
Well, we don't know because that could be a McDonald's now.
Oh fuck! Okay,
and it's only only David Campbell who remembers
God. That was amazing.
It's like that movie about the Beatles,
about doing Christianity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yesterday.
So he hadn't had a good night's sleep because he'd had a what he called a terrifying cannabis-induced panic attack.
Oh no! Sorry to hear that, David.
And just listen to the horrors of Gulag Caledonia. Just listen to this. I don't know how anyone could go through this. He had been woken by his alarm at 7:30 a.m. to get ready for his back to work mental health assessment.
No.
At the Department of Work and Wellbeing.
Is that optional or?
No.
Fuck.
You have to. The state has to see how you're doing. I know. And imagine this, like the best outcome, and this is just like if everything goes well, is that he could keep his monthly universal basic income allowance.
Oh, wow.
And you wouldn't have one of those. Want that. No. you wouldn't want that.
Money.
It says, if not, things could get very, very tricky. Then he goes on for a little bit about how in these times, like mental health, it's gone nuts. Like everyone's got it.
As in like, everyone's is bad or everyone's is really good?
Well, no, like everyone's obsessed with the old mental health. And they
isn't he a psychiatrist?
He is, and he's very keen for us to know this because the next page is filled with kind of Kleinian levels of boring detail about what's going on here.
Is it very similar to the thing you said about what Don DeLillo is doing?
No. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It is in fact the exact same thing as the putting in brackets who the characters are, because what he does is he says such things as the methods of assessment were based on traditional cognitive psychology. For example, negative early maladaptive schemata, brackets, e.g. abandonment, enmeshment with parents, that's close brackets, conditional and unconditional dysfunctional attitudes, brackets, e.g. I am a failure if I don't succeed. So he's explaining it all.
Is that literature then? When you just
that is literature. That's how you create art.
Okay, that's good to know. So what you know.
he says then there's but listen, if you didn't like that, then there's a bit of fun kind of foul wordplay coming up here.
Okay.
Where he talks about another aspect of the thing that he says this was a scheme brackets or scam if you look at it a different way.
Is it SCHAM?
No.
I'd love it if he'd committed to with chucking the 8.
His grammar is so appalling. I wouldn't be surprised if he had done that. There's lots of kind of like unfinished sentences. And there's also stuff here where he kind of forgets whether he's writing like in adjectival or noun phrases. So he says
cool.
it was pseudoscientific, comma, clairvoyance, comma, and pre-crime science fiction.
That's hard to pass.
Yeah.
But that's what it's like in Gulag Caledonia. It is hard to pass.
That's it.
It's a world where words themselves have lost their meaning and kind of essential sentence type.
Exactly that.
Because of the woke.
And
left.
if you're they've destroyed language. Yeah. That's one of the things they've done.
That's what they're trying to do with pronouns, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And he says, God, another of the massive fears here coming through, that basically what's happening is everyone is constantly being assessed. And if you're unemployed, then you're being assessed even more. And that it basically functions as like a social and mental credit score, like they have in the China.
Yes, exactly like that one that we all know is definitely true about how China works.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
It would be terrible to imagine a world where people who are out of work get harassed by the state. Like, that is a real Gulag Caledonia.
That would be terrible. And as if like that, then the amount of money that you get is kind of like based on these sort of strange
that feel
assessments.
arbitrary or sometimes just sort of designed to frustrate and make you ultimately sort of despair and maybe kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be mental. How would you describe that sort of world?
Dystopian, I think, is the word that comes to mind.
Any other words? Wow, that's funny because he says here it was, as they say, a truly dystopian Orwellian nightmare.
2 for 2, baby. I hate
you're blowing away smoke from the end of your guns like a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
My woke guns.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to describe things as like there's a weird sort of metatextuality that is usually quite interesting, but I think really sucks if the only referent for the kind of book you're writing is just remember what Orwell was like, and it's that.
I'm afraid that you're not going to like this whole chapter.
Damn.
So then there's an amazing bit here that I highlighted only because it's proper creepypasta vibes. You know how we said that one of the sort of like touchstones of all creepypastas is
licking
irrelevant bits of detail that they think makes it like a real story.
Oh yeah.
So here it says that he had accumulated enough nicotine vapor and took a shower, dressed quickly, drank a quick cup of coffee before leaving his 6th floor apartment. Great
his
detail.
6th floor apartment. That will come in handy later. But it makes you feel like you're there, doesn't it? With the nicotine and the repeated uses of the word quick.
Then there's some more dystopian hell here. His block, in the middle of 6 miles of similar blocks, housed a mixture of multicultural peoples and families.
No, I'd hate to live in a community.
As well as many single people, all educated, poor with little hope of ever moving out of the block or escaping the uber surveillance of digitized universal basic income, which he's then, in brackets, is doobie.
Doobie.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Doobie.
Doobie.
Yeah. Well,
and then, and I haven't got to the worst bit of all yet. Because like that's where you live, and you have to obviously you have to pay your rent to live there. And then it says,
imagine.
God, sorry, I needed a second to get ready for
content warning.
If one was unemployed, the state would contribute to the cost.
Fuck that.
Yeah. And
not
then
on my watch.
And then imagine this sort of hellscape. If you worked, rent would be extortionate enough to make life barely livable.
God, yeah, that would suck.
Thankfully, this is the distant future.
Is it? I can't tell what he's doing though. Like, is he being ironic? Because some of those things are, some of them are, you can chalk up to him just being a stupid idiot who doesn't understand how the world actually is. But some of them, like, no one is out there thinking that it's a great time for renters. Like even the David Campbell, whatever his actual author name is.
The Bruce Scotts of the world.
so incredibly Scottishly interchangeable names.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just like
I keep thinking one of them is Dr. Bruce Campbell. Like more than once I've typed that into Google.
But like he, even through the warped lens of whatever his bizarre ideology is, like he must know that some of these things are the case now. So what is
no. So unfortunately, his belief, it is the proper like, God, wouldn't this be terrible about things that are already happening? But like, what if they were happening to me? Is because if they happen to him, then that's communism.
Okay.
And
because that's not far away from how we live now. Really, we live in miles and miles of blocks. We can't afford.
There's
anything.
multicultural people.
There's multicultural people.
Yeah. The only thing we don't have is a universal basic income.
A doobie. Yeah, I'm always looking out. I keep emailing government@gmail.com. Subject line doobie, ?
Dear Mr. Sunak, please. It is honestly like every single thing here is like that he describes as terrible is just something that would be really good if we had it. And
it's very similar to political cartoon thing, right? That we were just looking at before that starts, where you can like the satire element of political cartoons and this is so scattered, like, and so stochastic and so ultimately not there at all because it ain't satire and it ain't clever or good, that you can like all of these things that he's fitting in, these sort of appearances of his dystopia, like some of them might be things he thinks are here now that he's saying like, oh, let's look at them in a new light. Some of them are things he thinks might exist in the future. Some of them are like speculative to the nth degree, but he never has to explain what his actual viewpoint is. Because if you were to ask him, he's just like, well, it's satire. Like, it's just take from it what you will.
Here's some of his viewpoints. I was scouring through his Twitter to see what he's been up to and what he's been thinking about lately.
Are you guys in touch on Twitter at all?
No, not yet. Although I am thinking of emailing him to ask, like, legitimately, what does he think? Actually, what I wanted to ask is how similar are he and David Campbell really? Because my feeling is that it's a 1-to-1.
Yeah. He did a big Control F find replace Bruce Scott David Campbell job before sending it off to the self-publishers.
Yeah. So just a few. In fact, yesterday there was a story about in Chile. A fisherman caught a huge 5-meter fish, which is considered a harbinger of disaster.
Oh, bad luck.
A captured oarfish usually lives at a depth of 1,000 meters and only rises to the surface due to the movement of tectonic plates,
bad news,
storms, currents, or illness.
Or wokeness.
And then he retweeted someone who had quote tweeted this saying, so this happened a few days ago, and then Chile had a 6.4 earthquake yesterday. Nature is weird and wonderful, Green Heart.
That's so true.
It's like, well, it's not weird and wonderful, is it? Because they did say that one of the things that causes it to come up to the surface is the movement of tectonic plates.
That is weird, though, a fish.
That is strange.
It doesn't even have to breathe air.
He's done he shared a They Live meme that was decrying the you must have seen it all over the news. I've just sent it to you in the little chat to have a look at. Of the difference in the old weather graph and now the weather graph. So that's very good. Because
we're fear-mongering about climate change is the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Because there is no climate change. And I remember every other year when we've had 40-degree
He's been sharing lots of stuff about how the 1976 heat wave was like much worse and like, don't believe that. He in fact called it 1984 bullshit.
So he referred to 1976 as 1984 bullshit.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Which is very good. So those are some of the things that he sort of seemingly does believe.
Well, he's got his finger in the pies of every hot button issue under the sun.
Then tell me what you think about this. So he gets to the DWW and he gets off the bus.
Not a bus. Not a fucking communist bus. Where's his 4x4?
Oh no! Sorry. No, he's not. This is him getting to the bus stop. My apologies.
Okay.
It was shivering. He was shivering on this dark, dank morning. There were other people waiting with him. 2 children of primary school age, with their very fat, harassed mother, who was lecturing the children in an Asian language David could not recognize, an old man with a bandaged hand who was engrossed in his phone, and a very pretty young woman dressed in an extremely short leather skirt, reeking of perfume and her face caked in makeup. What a rag bag of people.
What a rag
Now
bag.
it's interesting because he doesn't even attribute that to David. That's just its own sentence. What a rag bag.
That's an author's note.
Yeah, exactly. Like
that's just
he's taking the earnest, put the footnote in the text kind of vibe.
Yeah, that's that's the same thing where like it's like the level of it's really confusing, and I don't think there's a good way of explaining it, but it's a lot like what I just said about that jam jar in the political cartoon. Like, for those who weren't me or Declan before the show, we looked at a political cartoon, which is my least favorite medium on God's earth.
Yeah, we weren't looking at it because we share them because we love them.
We fucking hate them, and they suck, and everyone who does them would be better off dead. In this political cartoon, which was about nothing, there was Rishi Sunak, who is the Chancellor, was holding a jam jar that says tax cuts. And I made the point that you could drop that into any political cartoon that has ever been created, this jam jar, and it would have no more or less meaning in any case. And it's the same thing here. Like, it's up to us as the reader to interpret what he thinks he means by saying that there's a fat Asian woman, or that there's a hot girl who's ruining her looks by wearing slutty skirt and having too much makeup these days.
Hang on a minute, Isaac. He never said slutty.
No, that's true. That's true. It's just sort of there between the lines, so vividly between the lines that it's sort of pushing the lines apart.
Yeah, it's
and replacing it.
Yeah, but like the whole like point of a lot of that kind of like alt-right rhetoric, and the fact that they hide behind this idea of like irony and it's a joke and all of this is this kind of, they think that there's this idea of plausible deniability that comes from them not using explicit words, as if like implication is something that doesn't exist
and can't be observed.
No, or in any way objectively commented upon, and they can always hide behind it. Which
I feel like there has to be like a consensus about what the signifiers are. Like, Pepe. Everyone got on board with the idea that we're going to use this as a fun way of propagating this particular idea. But with so many of the things that he's talking about, there is no given, like, our interpretation of what it's like to live in a big housing estate that is multicultural it's not a given that we're going to be like, fuck that. Like, there has to be some language that exists where because otherwise he could just say anything and then wink, and the reader's like, oh, that must be bad. Yeah. He'd be like, and she was eating a sandwich, brown bread it was. And you're like, oh, not that. Fuck that.
Not the
whole
woke,
meal.
Not the woke brown bread.
The woke granary.
Not like we used to be able to have bread with lead in it that was nice and white.
It was all crust back when I were a boy. But like, it's so weak because there is nothing at the core of it. Like, it's all just pretending that behind the curtain is really what I believe. But then you look behind the curtain, there's nothing, because he doesn't have a coherent stance. There is no ideology. No. It's just motivated by a vague sense that these are all bad things in unconnected ways.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, I think part of it, this is a refusal by people who are like very generally on the right, but specifically on that kind of like angry right, who they're not capable of coming to terms with the fact that the system they support is the one that's making all of these problems that they hate. So they have to invent some kind of like antagonist that is behind it. And like, sometimes this reaches the conspiracy theory levels of like, oh, it's the Jews who are running all of this. It's the Illuminati. And sometimes it comes down to other madder things like, well, it's trans people. Like, trans people are the reason that my rent is so high, and trans people are the reason that our energy bills are going up, because, all of this kind of like woke language that we've got to do, like, it's just making the world like a madman's place. It's like
they just sort of point to it as a symptom, but I can never explain how.
No, exactly.
In what way it mechanistically relates.
And it's because if you dare to sort of say to these people, like, do you not think that it's maybe just like all the people who are kind of actually just in charge and are like quite openly in charge, just sort of wanted it to be like that? Like, I was talking to, because there was a girl at school who, I say a girl at school, it's someone who works there, but like, who was making some point about you know, she was like, oh, I know, you know, COVID is real, but like, look at all of the stuff that's like happened in terms of, you know, all the changes and all the laws and all of this, like something's going on there. And I was like, yeah, but like, that's just people taking advantage of this situation. Like, there's no grand narrative. It's just like, for instance, the British government saw what was happening and went, oh, cool, like we can introduce some more police powers, like, and we've got a reason to do that here, and we just maybe won't take them away again. Like, that's fine. Like, but it can't ever be as simple as just someone cynically kind of going, oh, hang on, here's another like hole we can plug in people's freedoms. It has to be that, you know, because otherwise you have to accept that, well, maybe
the people are just mad and I made a bad choice.
Maybe we've set this shit up wrong, and the alternatives would be good. And that is, again, because we are literally, after this, he blames it on, he says this was a life with an erased past. Doesn't mean anything. But he says social justice warriors from the sexual revolution in the 1960s up to the early 21st century had destroyed the remaining remnants of Western culture, Christian heritage, and traditional values, including the positive notions of the family, marriage, and the cherishing of children. This was the communist dystopia that the great Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn had warned would come to the West.
I forgot that this is the only book he's read.
He can't see anything past it. So, like, yeah, again, like, it's like, well, if it's bad, then it's communism.
Yeah. No, that does track. Marx hates kids.
Always was saying so.
Yeah.
Marx said, don't have a mum and a dad. Have 2 mums, famously.
Yeah.
There's chapters upon chapters of it. So then he goes on a little rant here about, you know, what's happened to David. And you'll never guess, well, why do you think David was so hated? Why do you think David has ended up here?
He probably didn't subscribe to the woke ideology in some form, right? Did he stand up to crazy new bathroom rules or something?
Well, it's worse than that. He's a white cis male.
Well, I mean, the problem is, I was right, but I was wrong in the sense that his whole existence is an affront to the woke, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because of white genocide.
Exactly. So worse than all this, he was a white heterosexual male who identified as a biological male. This hateful narrative towards the white cis male was gradually introduced during the late 20th century and became common-day parlance amongst the social justice warriors and mainstream media in the early 21st century.
How are you? Fuck whites.
Then apparently he talks about universities decolonizing their curriculums, which apparently entail getting rid of any white male authors from reading lists.
It's very funny that, like, to directly use the term decolonize, like, as the thing you're against means that you are tacitly in favor
you
of
are pro-colonizing.
Yeah, like, it's a mad thing to just
hyper-colonizing.
Like, yeah. I think more of that, actually.
Yeah. The great works of literature from people such as Plato, Shakespeare, Dante, Montaigne, Kierkegaard, etc. They were all consigned
famously all straight white men.
Yeah, they were consigned to Room 101 of banned texts.
Fuck.
Yeah.
That's a reference, isn't it? Room 101.
And then imagine this, it's a reference to
the TV show
Farm.
Where the pigs were kept.
The universities operated on a system of positive discrimination whereby, imagine this,
go on,
they would actively hire females, black and ethnic minorities, and LGBTQI plus people for jobs. They would actively do that.
That's mad.
Previously
they had to sneak in.
Exactly. So yeah, basically what happened is all of this became more and more of the sort of status quo.
Yeah. I still have a few questions as to how it became a big miles long.
Yeah, just you know, like just
I guess that would naturally happen.
That's just the drip of authoritarianism, isn't it?
I guess.
And apparently, you know, like men's rights groups were sort of saying, "Oh, you know, that we're being dealt an unfair hand here," and they were getting, you know, more and more hated. For this.
That's men's rights groups. That's sad.
So then counter-terrorism operations were defined and redefined to create categories of hate crimes. And of course, hate was defined as anything that contradicted the cultural Marxist narrative.
Okay. And does he explain, is there a footnote?
It says,
just to kind of outline what that is.
It says, or attempt to bolster traditional ideas of marriage, family, or child rearing, brackets, by two biological parents.
Child rearing is a horrible phrase. They're not really little animals, are they?
Again, only ever used by these sorts of freaks.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting that apparently that part, the marriage and family part, is the only part that isn't culturally Marxist, because it has to be mentioned separately. Like, because a page ago, Marx hated all this.
Yeah.
But there you go.
Well, he was confusing, wasn't he?
So basically, David, he was a promising postdoctoral researcher at St Andrews University. And his topic of research was political activist groups.
God, I love how when the line between fiction and reality just becomes a little tiny membrane.
There's an email that David receives later that I'm 100% certain is copy-pasted. Yeah.
That's very good.
So after a promising PhD researching the Occupy movement and its offshoots, Extinction Rebellion, brackets, climate activists, and Antifa, brackets, anti-fascists, of the early 21st century, movements which essentially helped the world governments usher in digital technocratic totalitarianism. Which is what they're looking for, isn't it?
That's their main goal, yeah.
That's what Antifa is always on about.
Yeah.
You know that big organization, Antifa.
Yeah, huge and well-funded.
What they're doing is it's like punch racists, and which is probably just anyone they disagree with, and just everyone give your eye scans over to the government,
and you can't even run them over in your big car anymore.
Yeah, so he basically he infiltrated one of these groups, and he made them. It's quite unclear, really, what
he legally can't say what he made them do.
Yeah, what the point was, but basically, it was like he sort of infiltrated and made his way to the top, and then tried to see if he could make them fall apart. Wow. He was doing he was sort of doing COINTELPRO stuff, but by he sort of like made women share men as sexual playthings. And
how did he make them do that?
Doesn't say. It just says children were shared among several caregivers.
Oh no!
Gender neutrality became commonplace, both in appearance and in roles, and inevitably the camp
was
disbanded.
He caused this.
It was not sustainable existence to live in tents in a city centre. Well, no, he actively did. Like that was the whole point of his.
So
research,
he's getting mad at the thing that he did,
which feels kind of like I thought that one of the more fundamental aspects of research is that you observe rather than
usually when people are doing like an ethnographic study, they don't go and just say like, I wonder what it'd be like if we introduced pinball.
Right, I'm in charge. You fuck him, you fuck her.
Mad.
David's uncomfortable conclusions were not welcomed by academia in the wider world.
Weird.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was completely bankrupt of any academic legitimacy.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was just fiddling with all the data.
So, and then he goes on about, indeed, things moved into a desperate places when researchers started blaming fatigue or general malaise on late-stage capitalism, a lazy and unverifiable hypothesis which fed into a childish desire for self-entitlement, narcissism, nihilism, and even more hysterical demands to the state. I mean, even more hysterical demands. They then introduced the doobie. So the state licked its lips in glee in the great scare quotes pandemic of 2020. The world governments used demands of climate activism and other kinds of hysterically fed activism to usher in political overreach to keep people, scare quotes, safe and to scare quotes save the world. David came unstuck, so to speak, when researching anarcho-communist activist groups in Glasgow. He discovered a virulent, toxic feminist totalitarian hierarchy whereby men were outlawed from speaking, having an opinion, or having men-only groups to discuss issues.
Wow.
I know, it was terrible. And then here's an interesting twist here, because his new big concern is that many of the men found themselves on the verge of or having or experiencing mental breakdowns through the guilt and shame they were burdened with. For many, the worst punishment was expulsion from their respective activist groups. Many men committed suicide as a result. Now, I thought a second ago that we'd all gone mental health crazy.
Yeah, I guess we had, but it's these brave men who they're the real mental healths.
So it turns out that like his professor, his supervisor, sort of like started backing away from his stuff. Her name, by the way, Professor Karen Horton Smith. Horton spelled Whorton.
For real?
Yeah.
That's really good.
And then one day while he's on holiday, this was on the 15th of October 2041.
That's good to know.
He got an email. It's an amazing thing to imagine that, like, he just thinks that this is how everything will still be done in 2041. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying that email won't exist then, but it's just very funny that, like,
he's really sure about it.
Yeah. So, dear Dr. Campbell, we are writing to you as it's come to the attention of the university that you broke your terms of employment as set out in 2.1 of the terms of your postdoctoral tenure within the university, namely that you have engaged in hate speech, which has been of a misogynistic and transphobic nature. Now, this is the bit that I'm saying is lifted directly.
we're saying could be.
Yeah, could.
Conceivably.
Yeah. It's very believable. It's so believable that I believe it. This is not in keeping with the university's ethos of inclusion and diversity. Further, your views have been extremely offensive to your supervisor and other work colleagues within the Department of Political Anthropology in the School of Social Sciences. So then it turns out Horton Smith has written to the people who fund the postdoctoral programs. They've ceased all its funding, no further salary payments. And then, get this, guess what's happened? The contents of his office have been searched for offending materials. Anything relevant will be passed on to Police Scotland Hate Speech Department. But yeah, so it's like, don't bother coming back. Bye-bye.
That's harsh, isn't it? That would drive anyone to distraction.
Yeah. So his name went on a blacklist. In fact, it says his name went on black space lists. Among all
that just means
among all universities, brackets several global lists, which highlighted his scare quotes crimes. So then we're sort of like coming back to the present day. It says that was 9 years ago. David was now 38 years old, on digital universal basic income, and now off for his mental health assessment at the Department of Work and Wellbeing. Like, it's just proper.
Just to remind us.
Yeah, just in case you'd forgot. And then you'll never guess this other completely organic tragedy that he's managed to weave into the character of Dr. David Campbell, being that the worst part was, due to the social credit scoring system, his wife felt coerced and forced to separate from him for the sake of their two children, 2 boys aged 4 and 7.
Very good.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
That's very good.
Yeah. That it's probably only a coincidence that in the, like, one of the forewords he sort of like mentioned having two boys. It would, it could be just coincidence.
It's art imitating life.
Yeah.
But accidentally, I should.
100%. Yeah. So. And then here, this was another one of those super telling sentences where it's like, oh yeah, imagine. It said the bullies had taken over society. When bullies take over a society, there is no justice, and there's nobody one can turn to for help. For the people who are meant to help them are the bullies.
Fuck.
You wouldn't want to live in a world like that, would you?
That would be terrible.
Then there's a great sentence. Every grey, miserable face on this veritable meat truck taking them into the city centre for their menial, meaningless jobs told a story. Full stop. Stories.
Does it share what they are?
Stories that would never be told and never be heard.
Just in case you were looking forward to hearing them. This isn't no fucking Canterbury Tales fucking bus chat shit. I don't care what Fat Mary's.
We're here to hear about Dr. David Campbell and Dr. David Campbell only.
That's really funny.
The landscape was of a non-changing, homogeneous, grey, bleak, infinite landscape portrait.
The landscape was of a landscape.
Yeah,
portrait.
exactly.
That's so
landscape
stupid.
portrait is an oxymoron.
That's really fucking good. What an idiot. That's so very stupid.
The landscape was like a picture of the landscape.
But crucially, one that was orientated
both
in the
ways at
vertical
once.
configuration. It's spinning around.
So then he goes on describing all of these like tenement blocks again. And it's like,
what color are they?
And again, well, the thing that I find is that it's just like these sound really good and convenient, right? So situated on the ground floor of these blocks were mini supermarkets. open for 24 hours, where you could buy anything from drugs, alcohol, phones, food, widescreen televisions. They love to mention the widescreen TVs, don't they?
That's so funny. That's so 90s. That's like throwback. That's proper like benefit cheat kind of days.
There was, of course, the enormous variety of fast food restaurants and takeaways selling the latest artificial protein-based and insect-based protein foodstuffs, as well as artificial processed vegan varieties.
Yes, representation.
Interspersed along the routes were bars, nightclubs, erotica shops where you could buy all manner of sex toys, sex dolls, and pornography. One could also buy
in every tower block they have an erotic shop.
One could also buy a plethora of drugs to enhance sexual enjoyment and stimulation. For the gender fetishist, one could purchase cross-sex hormones. If one fancied becoming the other gender, one could pop some inexpensive estrogen or testosterone.
Like it's polyjuice potion.
Yeah, exactly. It's just for a second. Chest binders and chest binders and castration devices could be bought for very little. The bars and nightclubs along these vast expanses of social, cultural, and community obliteration were places where time could be wallowed away in a haze of booze and pills.
Wow,
sex
dream
had become a hobby.
Rather than something one schedules in 3 months in advance for the sole purpose of procreation with my wife, who doesn't like me much.
Sexual liberation had certainly reached its zenith. To hook up with someone had become nothing more uncommon than ordering a takeaway or food delivery from a supermarket.
Well, that sounds really easy if they're in every building.
Yeah. People just... and then again, just such a huge, like... What do you think? Like, what do you think when you look at the world around you? People just existed for the state to feed off, for their labor, for their data, to control them further.
Oh, that'd be bad.
2050, everyone. It was, as Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World Revisited, as if these vices and passions of the people were fed by the soma. To keep people in chains, he says, and this is the most ironic of them all, is one way of controlling people, but it's not very efficient, as people can rebel. But when people willingly put on their own chains, then that is a whole different ballpark. It's like, my brother in Christ, you have put on the chains.
Of your imagination.
The populace becomes as docile as a kitten as it exists in a hypnotized state towards their own enslavement, a meaningless life, and their inevitable death.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, death would be inevitable either way, but sure.
Yeah.
I guess we can pretend that's scarier in this case.
And thus ends chapter 1.
It'd be terrible to die having lived in a really nice tower block with lots of amenities.
With all my vegan-based sodomy funded by the doobie.
One of the crazy government schemes. You thought Eat Out to Help Out was bad. Well, 2050 one up to.
I was just waiting for my fucking monthly doobie so that I could go out and get myself a couple of castration devices just in case the first one didn't take.
Oh, wow. Doing a saw trap to myself.
Yeah.
Doing a gender saw trap to myself. Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Dr. David Campbell.
Dr. Bruce Scott.
Whichever. For your contribution to the show. Now back, all the way back to Shermer High School. Now this is a John Hughes kind of place. Maybe I should start from the beginning of the chapter just so that we...
No, please
John Hughes inertia.
Ducky's been decapitated. Artery misses run off to a shop or something.
She's recasting the foul.
Yeah.
They run past Bender's locker from the Breakfast Club, which has an axe that comes down.
I thought he meant from Futurama.
Yeah. I couldn't... Every time they said his name was Bender in the movie, I went on a sort of 30-second Futurama reverie in my head. Blah, blah, blah. They just describe that when you open his locker, an guillotine comes down. She gets from his locker a big bag of the content warning drugs, marijuana, the drug marijuana weed. And I don't know, I'd never pegged Artie as a druggie, so I guess this bit hit me quite hard because it's sad to know that she even is aware of what it is. You know, I thought she was better than that. We've got the magic herb and the magic slippers, Artemis said. Now it's time for us to hit the city, baby, dead on. We have some drinks, a little nightlife, some dancing. Let's go. And she just fucking runs off again.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a quote from anything because uncharacteristically, it's not explained. I don't know if she's just lost her mind. Once we made it outside, Art 3 mistook us on a shortcut across the football field, and As we walked past one of the goalposts, we triggered another needle drop on the Simulation soundtrack. It happened to be one of H's all-time least favourite songs, Don't You, brackets, Forget About Me by Simple Minds. And she's getting annoyed about it, and she does the arm up, like fake punch in the sky.
Imagine, and then now it would be much cooler here if she freeze framed in the sky and like couldn't move. Like at the end of the like, please, screaming silently,
and her skin melts.
Yeah,
that'd be really cool. Like in the movie. H gets a call from her fiance Indira, who's freaking out, and also it's revealed for the first time is just sort of standing outside the immersion coffin vault that H is in, like calling her from there,
right?
Just sort of staring at this, which is quite a horrible image that he doesn't seem to realize is interesting because he explains it in one sentence.
I see, yeah.
And all of this, don't go thinking we're going to learn anything about their relationship, or that it's going to develop the characters, because actually the only reason that this call happens is to set up that Shoto remembers, I should talk to Kiki, presumably his partner as well, so that Artemis says, well, it won't take all four of us to collect the shard. How about you and I, Wade, keep moving and we'll give them some time with their ladies. The prospect of being alone with Artemis for the first time in years rendered me momentarily speechless. After a few seconds of awkward silence, I finally blurted out a response. Sure, I said.
He starts openly jacking it before remembering he'd no longer have the robes of Anorak, and everyone can just see him.
Very thoughtful of you. Okay, Z, let's go snag this thing. And then she's sprinting off to a different part of the neighborhood. It's like the rich kid upscale neighborhood, expensive homes. She's pointing at all of the houses and saying, parents in Europe, parents in Europe. All the rich kids' parents are in Europe, which I thought was gently amusing. The first house they pass, this is one of your favorites. This will give you what they call a fangasm. It's the one from Some Kind of Wonderful belonging to Craig Schaefer's character, Hardy Jens.
I was hoping it would get a mention.
Mary Stuart Masterson, Eric Stoltz, Leah Thompson.
You don't have to tell me twice.
I won't. A few seconds later, they bump into Duncan, brackets, Elias Cotius, who jumps out with a whole gang of mean-looking hoods.
Dunks.
Yeah. That party is about to become a historical fact, Artemis said. That made me laugh out loud. Blah, blah, blah. They keep on running. This bit, I don't understand, but I haven't seen the film, so I guess I wouldn't. But it just sounds really like off-kilter for the rest of the films. A half-naked girl shoots up out of a chimney, like reverse Santa, and lands in a small pond. And then she's like, here we go. Like, this happens all the time. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go and look for 2 NPCs from Weird Science. Hang on, I'll be right back. And so she draws guns and runs. I don't know where she's got these weapons. Runs into the house, and Wade from the outside hears like gunfire and a grenade going off. And then Artemis just comes back and is like, they're not in there. And so she reveals they're looking for these 2 people called Max and Ian, who party hop. They go to different places. The 2 assholes who dump an icy on Gary and Wyatt in Weird Science. Why do we need them? So we can get the 3rd shard, Z, she replied, in the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a very small child. Just trust me, okay? That'll save us a lot of time. She's used this excuse about 4 times at this point, and it ain't saving anyone any time. She points to another house and is like, there's all horny teenagers on the lawn and beer cans and pizza and there's music. Who lives there, I asked. Jake Ryan, she said. If you spot Ian or Max, I need you to restrain both of them and then call me. If I spot them at Stubby's, I'll do the same.
No.
Okie dokie, Ogie doggy.
What?
Oggy doggy, maybe? I grinned and replied, Okie dokie, doggy daddy.
What?
I don't know. No. It must be from a film. Artemis took off, sprinting towards Stubby's house.
I refuse to believe the MPAA ever allowed that to be released.
I stared after her, then I took a deep breath and ran in the opposite direction, toward Jake Ryan's house. Boom! And I think you'll agree, what an incredible
No, he doesn't leave it there.
Daddy Doggy's off to Stubby's, while Oggy Doggy's off to Jakey's. It's the fucking night. It's what we all dreamed.
Oh, God. The tension.
I know, it's rattled me straight to my big spinal
palpable.
So there we leave it until next time that we come back to this big podcast of Big Bad Books.
Goodness.
I think the theme for this one would be prevaricating. And I guess, a cynic would say, well, the reason that they never explain the puzzle until it's solved, is that there is no satisfying solution, and it relies on an impossible set of logical leaps and guesses that defy even the most cursory explanation. And that would be very transparent to a reader.
They require you to assume that the clues are wrong.
True. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's just what a cynic would say. I think it's the greatest story ever told.
Yeah.
And I want to put that on record. Speaking of greatest stories ever told, well, it's tenuous, but I'd like you to tell the story of where people can engage with the Shame City gang outside of this great big business we call show.
So, starting up again in a fiery fashion this week will be our streamage.
Oh, huge.
Over at twitch.tv/shamecity or shame.city/twitch, where they're normally about Monday through Thursday, about 9 p.m.
It is very hot, isn't it? It's hard to turn the computer on when it's this hot.
It's been very warm, but there'll be some stuff happening. And also you can find us over on Twitter. So for this show, we have at Big Bad Books, but for general stuff, we've got at Shame City Gang. You can join the Discord where there's all manner of stuff happening. That's over at shame.city/discord. And if you feel for whatever reason, maybe it's heat stroke, donating to fund some of this horse shit, then you can go to patreon.com/shamecity.
Where even though you haven't, recently your donation hasn't been funding a lot of new content, you are paying for a back catalogue of 80 something episodes that you get instantly. So even if, as always happens every summer, invariably, the good ship Shame takes a little break and starts wobbling in the heat as it sails round, some of the warmer climes. Don't worry, we've got you. There's huge amounts of back catalogue. There's literally hundreds of episodes,
including, as you mentioned, Nerd Pornoteur.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll want to know what that's all about, won't you? Yeah, I would. So that's patreon.com/shamecity.
Yeah.
I think that's all. We should hopefully be back for That's a Shame next week. We've got our Patreon exclusive podcast cups that we're going to record soon. Until 2 weeks or so, I've been Isaac. I've been
Declan.
See you in the gulag.
Bye, guys.